The stars above Triton's cold surface flickered against the vastness of space like distant, forgotten embers. The moon's atmosphere, thin and icy, rarely allowed for storms, but tonight the wind howled in an unusual manner. It whipped through the colony's metallic structures, rattling windows and filling the night with a sense of foreboding. But inside the walls of Outpost 32, little Mia, a 7-year-old girl with wide, curious eyes, played alone in her family's small living quarters, oblivious to the chilling winds and the growing tension in the air. Mia had always been fascinated by the stars. Her father used to tell her stories about the galaxies beyond planets with strange creatures, giant ships made of metal, and explorers brave enough to travel between the stars. She would listen, mesmerized, as her father told her about Earth, a place she had never seen, and the mysteries that lay far beyond the Milky Way. But tonight, those stories felt too distant, too far away to comfort her. She sat on the floor, clutching her favorite stuffed toy, a small, worn-out bear named Benny. Her father had gone on a work trip to one of the other outposts, and her mother was busy in the next room, checking colony systems. The loneliness Mia felt gnawed at her more than usual. The lights flickered, just for a moment. Mia paused, looking up. Something felt wrong. The usual hum of machinery that filled their home had quieted, replaced by an eerie silence. She stood up, her small frame barely reaching the window ledge, and peered outside. What she saw sent a shiver down her spine. Hovering just above the colony was an enormous shadow, too smooth and silent to be natural. It wasn't one of the transport ships her father worked on, it was something else. Something unfamiliar. Mia's heart began to race as she watched the strange, dark shape glide through the night sky, blocking out the stars. It moved with an eerie grace, too quiet for its size, and for the first time, Mia felt real fear. Suddenly, a piercing light shot down from the ship, illuminating the colony below. She gasped, backing away from the window. Her first instinct was to call out for her mother, but before she could, the ground beneath her began to tremble. Her feet staggered, the vibrations growing stronger. Without warning, the lights in the colony flickered again, this time plunging the entire outpost into darkness. Mia's tiny heart pounded in her chest as she felt the building shake beneath her feet. She clutched Benny tighter, her eyes wide as she stumbled towards the door of her mother's room. Just as her hand reached the handle, the door slid open. "Mama!" Mia cried, her voice trembling. But her mother wasn't there. Instead, strange figures, tall, gray-skinned beings with elongated heads and eyes that glowed faintly in the darkness, stood in the doorway. Mia froze, her body locking in place as she stared at them. These creatures weren't like anything she had ever seen. Their eyes were black, bottomless, and their long, bony fingers reached toward her, as though sizing her up. Mia tried to scream, but no sound came out. The aliens moved forward, their forms almost gliding over the ground. One of them extended a hand, its finger long and cold, and touched Mia's forehead. A sudden, sharp pain shot through her mind, and everything went white. Her vision blurred, her thoughts jumbled. She tried to fight it, but it was as if her mind was being pulled into a deep, dark pit, and no matter how hard she struggled, she couldn't resist. The next thing Mia knew, she was floating. When her eyes finally opened again, the familiar walls of her home were gone. She was inside a strange chamber, dimly lit by soft, pulsating lights that seemed to throb in time with her heartbeat. She was lying on her back, strapped down to a cold, metallic surface. The room around her was smooth, seamless, as if carved from a single piece of material. The air was thick, and it smelled of something acrid, like burning metal. Mia's head throbbed, her thoughts sluggish as she tried to make sense of where she was. Her first instinct was to call out for her mother again, but her throat was too dry, her voice caught in her chest. The aliens surrounded her once more, their black eyes watching her closely. They spoke in low, guttural tones, a language she couldn't understand. A strange hum filled the room, and Mia felt a cold sensation spread across her body as a machine descended from the ceiling, scanning her with beams of light. One of the aliens moved closer, holding a device that glowed faintly in the dim room. It reached for her again, and this time, Mia found the strength to struggle. She kicked her legs, trying to wriggle free from the restraints, but they were too strong. The alien paused, tilting its head as if confused by her resistance. It pressed the device to her chest, and Mia felt a sudden surge of energy pulse through her body, causing her to gasp. As the energy coursed through her, a new sensation began to bloom in her mind. For a brief moment, Mia could feel the alien's thoughts, its cold, analytical mind calculating, processing her as though she were nothing more than a specimen, a subject to be tested and discarded. That's when she understood. They had taken her along with many others from the colony for an experiment. She was nothing but a piece of data to them, something to be thrown into the wild and observed like a mouse in a maze. And she wasn't the only one. Through the alien's mind, she could see flashes of other children, other people from the colony, trapped in similar chambers, all destined for the same fate. Suddenly, a sharp mechanical sound filled the room. The restraints around Mia's body released with a metallic hiss, and she was lifted into the air, floating helplessly toward a large, circular hatch in the ceiling. Panic surged through her, but there was nothing she could do. She was powerless, trapped in the alien's grasp. The hatch opened with a low rumble, revealing the dark expanse of space beyond. Mia felt her heart drop as she was placed inside a small, pod-like vessel, its interior cold and featureless. The pod sealed around her with a quiet hum, and for a moment, there was only silence. Then, with a sudden jolt, the pod launched into space, shooting away from the alien ship like a bullet from a gun. Mia's body was pressed against the seat as the vessel hurtled through the stars, faster than anything she could imagine. She looked out of the small window, watching as the alien ship became a tiny dot in the distance. But her relief was short-lived. The pod was heading toward a planet, a dark, ominous world that loomed ahead like a predator waiting to pounce. The surface was jagged, its atmosphere thick with swirling black clouds. Mia didn't know it yet, but this was Zornox 7, the most dangerous planet in the galaxy. And soon, she would be face to face with the galaxy's deadliest predator. Mia's tiny body was pinned against the seat by the overwhelming force of the pod's descent. The speed was dizzying, the stars outside the window blurring into streaks of white. Her heart pounded in her chest as the pod raced through the emptiness of space, and the dark, foreboding planet loomed larger and larger. Zornox 7. The thick, black clouds that encased the planet churned ominously as her pod breached the atmosphere. Mia watched, her breath catching in her throat, as lightning crackled through the swirling vortexes, illuminating jagged mountain peaks that jutted out like the teeth of some ancient, cosmic beast. The pod shook violently, rattling her to the core. Mia gripped the straps that held her in place, trying to control the rising panic inside her. With a deafening roar, the pod slammed into the surface of Zornox 7. The impact knocked the air out of Mia's lungs, and her vision blurred as the world around her spun wildly. After what felt like an eternity, the pod finally came to a stop, embedded deep in the planet's rocky surface. For several moments, Mia sat there, dazed, her heart racing in her chest. Slowly, the vibrations of the crash faded, and the only sound left was her own ragged breathing. "Mama," she whispered, her voice trembling. But there was no one to hear her. Mia unclasped her seatbelt with shaky hands and crawled out of the pod, her legs weak beneath her. The air outside the pod was thick and smelled like sulfur, heavy with the stench of decay. Every breath she took burned her lungs, and she coughed, wiping tears from her eyes as she tried to steady herself. The landscape around her was alien and terrifying. Towering mountains of jagged black rock loomed over her like giants, casting long, menacing shadows across the ground. The earth was hard and barren, covered in patches of dark, oily moss that squelched beneath her feet. Above her, the sky was a swirling mass of storm clouds, glowing faintly from the lightning that crackled through them. There was no sign of life. No plants, no animals, nothing but the distant roar of thunder and the howling wind. It was a dead world. Mia took a deep breath, trying to keep her panic at bay. She had to find shelter, she told herself. She had to stay calm. That's what her father always told her in times of trouble: stay calm, think things through. But it was hard to stay calm when everything inside her screamed for her to run, to cry, to give up. She was just a little girl, lost on a planet she didn't understand. Her small feet shuffled forward, every step slow and hesitant. The gravity of Zornox 7 was heavier than she was used to, making her movements sluggish, her muscles ache. But Mia kept going, glancing back only once at the wreckage of her pod. It was no use to her now, nothing but a crumpled shell in a world where survival seemed impossible. As she walked, the wind picked up, howling through the jagged rocks like the cries of unseen creatures. Mia pulled her thin jacket tighter around herself, though it did little to shield her from the cold. She stumbled over the uneven terrain, her eyes scanning the barren landscape for anything that might offer protection from the harsh environment. A cave, a hollow, anything. Her heart sank when she saw nothing but desolation. The wind shifted suddenly, carrying with it a strange, low growl, deep and menacing. Mia froze in place, her blood turning to ice as the sound echoed across the rocks. She didn't know what it was, but her instincts screamed danger. Slowly, she turned her head, her eyes wide with fear. And then she saw it. Far in the distance, just beyond the ridge of a jagged mountain, a massive shape was moving slow, deliberate, and terrifying. Even from this distance, Mia could feel its presence, like a dark shadow creeping toward her. The creature's outline was hard to make out, obscured by the mist and the storm clouds above, but what she could see sent a chill down her spine. It was huge, easily the size of a building, its long limbs moving with a terrifying grace. Its body was covered in dark, glistening scales that shimmered faintly in the flashes of lightning. Long, curved claws jutted from its feet, leaving deep gouges in the rock as it moved. And though Mia couldn't see its face, she could feel its eyes on her, cold, calculating, and predatory. The Vornak. Mia didn't know its name, but the Zarthons had studied this creature for generations. It was a creature feared across the galaxy, a killing machine unlike anything else in the known universe. Its strength was unmatched, its intelligence terrifying. Entire squads of highly trained hunters had been sent to Zornox 7 in the past to capture or kill it, but none had returned. The Vornak had no rivals. It was the ultimate predator. And it had found its next prey. Mia's heart pounded in her chest, her legs trembling as the creature turned its head in her direction. Even from this distance, she could feel its gaze lock onto her, its nostrils flaring as it caught her scent. For a brief moment, she stood frozen, her mind screaming at her to run, but her body refusing to obey. The Vornak let out a low, rumbling growl, its massive body shifting as it began to move toward her, slowly at first, as though savoring the hunt. Mia's legs finally responded, and she turned and ran, her small feet stumbling over the rough terrain as she fled in the opposite direction. Tears streamed down her cheeks, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. She didn't know where she was going. She didn't know if there was anywhere to hide. All she knew was that she had to get away. She had to keep running, no matter how much her legs ached, no matter how much the thick air burned her lungs. The ground beneath her shook with the creature's footsteps as it closed in, each step sending vibrations through the earth like the ticking of a clock counting down to her doom. In the distance, through her blurred vision, Mia spotted something, a dark opening in the side of a cliff. A cave. Hope surged through her chest, and she pushed herself harder, her legs screaming in protest as she sprinted toward it. Behind her, the Vornak let out a thunderous roar, its pace quickening as it realized its prey was trying to escape. Mia reached the cave just as the Vornak's shadow fell over her, the ground trembling beneath its weight. She dove inside, scrambling to her feet and running deeper into the darkness. The creature's claws raked the ground outside, sending chunks of rock flying, but the entrance was too small for its massive body to fit through. For now, she was safe. Panting, Mia collapsed against the cool stone wall, her body shaking with exhaustion and fear. The Vornak let out another frustrated growl from outside, its long, dark claws scraping against the rock as it tried to reach her. But after a few moments, it seemed to lose interest, its massive form retreating back into the mist. Mia was alone again. But as she sat there, her breathing slowing, she noticed something strange about the cave. It wasn't just a natural formation. The walls were smooth, unnaturally so, and faint lines of light traced their way across the stone, pulsing with a strange, rhythmic energy. Mia's eyes widened as she reached out, her fingers brushing the surface. The moment she touched it, the lights flared to life, spreading through the cave like a network of glowing veins. Suddenly, a soft hum filled the air, and Mia stumbled backward as the floor beneath her shifted. A panel in the wall slid open, revealing a hidden chamber beyond, filled with strange, glowing machinery. It was unlike anything Mia had ever seen. The room buzzed with energy, and as Mia stepped inside, she felt a strange sensation wash over her like something ancient and powerful was stirring, waking up after being dormant for eons. The machines in the chamber whirred to life as though responding to her presence, and a faint blue light enveloped her. Mia blinked, confused and frightened, as the light swirled around her, pulsing in time with the beating of her heart. And then, without warning, the light surged forward, sinking into her skin, her bones, her mind. Mia gasped as a wave of energy coursed through her, filling her with a strength she had never known. The pain in her legs, her lungs, her entire body faded away, replaced by a strange warmth. Her mind felt clearer, sharper, as if something deep inside her had awakened. The Vornak was still out there, waiting. But Mia was no longer the helpless little girl she had been when she arrived. Something inside her had changed. And soon, the galaxy's deadliest predator would learn the consequences of underestimating her. Mia stood in the dimly lit chamber, her heart still racing from the chase, but something was different now. The fear that had consumed her moments ago had ebbed, replaced by a strange calmness, a clarity she didn't understand. The lights embedded in the walls pulsed softly, as if in rhythm with her heartbeat. The energy that had surged through her body moments ago lingered beneath her skin, a faint hum in her veins. Outside the cave, the Vornak paced restlessly. Its claws scraped against the jagged rocks, sending small avalanches of debris tumbling down the hillside. The creature growled low in its throat, frustrated by the prey that had slipped just out of reach. Mia could hear it, feel its presence like a weight pressing down on her, but for the first time, she didn't feel helpless. The nanites, microscopic machines now intertwined with her cells, whispered to her, guiding her movements. They were ancient, older than the Zarthons, and they had chosen her. The air in the cave grew warmer, the hum of the ancient machinery intensifying. Mia took a deep breath, trying to process what had just happened to her. She didn't fully understand it, but something inside her had shifted. She could sense the energy within her now, pulsing just beneath the surface, waiting to be unleashed. The Vornak, growing impatient, let out another roar. The sound echoed through the cave, shaking the walls and rattling the machinery around her. Mia felt a tremor beneath her feet but remained steady. The creature would not wait forever. Sooner or later, it would try to force its way inside. She had to be ready. As she stood there, Mia realized she was no longer the same girl who had crash-landed on this deadly planet. The fear that had consumed her was giving way to something else, something stronger. She clenched her fists, and to her surprise, she could feel the nanites respond, surging through her muscles, amplifying her strength. Her senses sharpened, the dim light of the cave brightened, and her hearing became more acute. She could hear the steady thump of the Vornak's heavy footfalls, the scrape of its claws against the stone, even the faint growl in its throat. Her mind, once scattered and panicked, now felt clear. The ancient technology had not just enhanced her physically, it had given her knowledge, flashes of information that flickered through her mind. She saw images of long-dead civilizations, of battles fought on distant worlds, of creatures like the Vornak hunted and defeated by beings who had once wielded the same power now coursing through her. Mia took a step toward the mouth of the cave, her small feet silent on the stone floor. The Vornak's growling grew louder, its shadow shifting outside the cave entrance. It could sense her movement, the tiniest vibrations in the ground signaling that its prey was stirring. But this time, the hunt was different. The Vornak, towering and monstrous, began to inch closer to the cave, its massive body filling the entrance. Its eyes, glowing a faint yellow, scanned the darkness inside, searching for the small figure it had been chasing. Mia, her back pressed against the cool stone wall, waited. She could hear the steady pulse of the nanites in her blood, feel the ancient power coiling inside her, ready to strike. The Vornak's long, clawed hand reached into the cave, scraping against the rock as it tried to pull itself inside. Its body was too large to fully enter, but its head followed, its massive jaws snapping as it tried to catch the scent of its prey. The creature growled, frustrated, and then its yellow eyes locked onto Mia. Mia's heart pounded, but not with fear. Something else had taken over, a calmness, a readiness. She stepped forward, her small form dwarfed by the enormous predator, and raised her hand. The nanites hummed in response, glowing faintly beneath her skin. The Vornak snarled, lunging toward her, its jaws wide open, teeth gleaming in the dim light. But as it closed in, Mia didn't flinch. Instead, she raised her other hand, and a shimmering shield of blue energy erupted between them. The Vornak's massive body collided with the shield, its momentum sending a shockwave through the cave. The force was enough to knock Mia back a step, but the shield held, its blue light crackling with power. The Vornak screeched in frustration, thrashing against the barrier. Its claws scraped at the shield, trying to break through, but the ancient technology was far beyond the creature's understanding. Mia gritted her teeth, focusing on the shield, pushing it back against the creature's relentless attacks. For a brief moment, time seemed to stand still. Mia could feel the power flowing through her, the strength of the nanites merging with her own. The Vornak roared again, but this time there was a note of uncertainty in its voice. It had never encountered anything like this before, prey that could fight back, prey that could hold its own. Mia took a deep breath, then lowered the shield. The Vornak stumbled forward, caught off guard by the sudden absence of resistance. It roared, swinging its massive claws toward her again, but Mia was already moving. The nanites had heightened her reflexes, and she dodged the attack with ease, darting to the side just as the creature's claws sliced through the air where she had been standing. She knew she couldn't keep running. She had to finish this. Somehow, deep inside her, she understood what to do. The ancient knowledge the nanites had given her guided her hands, her body, her mind. With a surge of energy, Mia thrust her hand forward, and a beam of blue light shot from her palm, striking the Vornak in the chest. The creature howled in pain, stumbling back as the light burned into its scales. It wasn't enough to kill it, but it was enough to wound it. Mia could see the fear in its eyes now, a flicker of uncertainty in the face of something it couldn't understand. The Vornak, enraged and wounded, charged again. This time, Mia didn't retreat. She stood her ground, her hands glowing with the energy of the nanites. As the creature lunged toward her, she jumped, leaping higher than any human could have, landing on a rocky outcrop above the beast. From her vantage point, Mia could see the Vornak's entire body, its dark scales glistening with sweat and blood. It snarled, confused by her sudden disappearance, its head whipping back and forth as it searched for her. Mia felt a surge of confidence. She wasn't just surviving now, she was winning. With a determined expression, Mia raised both her hands. The nanites hummed in response, and another beam of energy shot forward, this time stronger, more focused. It slammed into the Vornak's side, sending the creature crashing to the ground with a deafening roar. The beast writhed in pain, its massive claws digging into the rock as it tried to stand, but the energy coursing through its body was too much. Mia watched as the Vornak struggled, its strength fading. She could feel the nanites inside her urging her forward, but there was something else, something deeper. It wasn't just about survival anymore. The creature wasn't just a mindless predator, it was fighting for its life, just as she was. Slowly, Mia lowered her hands. The light around her faded, and the cave grew silent, save for the Vornak's labored breathing. The beast lay still, defeated but not dead. Mia stared down at it, her heart pounding in her chest. She could finish it, end the threat once and for all. The power inside her was more than enough to do it. But she didn't. Instead, she stepped back, letting the ancient energy within her subside. The Vornak, sensing the change, let out a low, rumbling growl but made no move to attack. It was beaten, wounded, but not destroyed. Mia took a deep breath, her body trembling as the last of the adrenaline faded. She had won, but something told her the fight wasn't over. The Vornak might have been the deadliest predator on Zornak 7, but there were greater dangers in the galaxy, dangers that the Zarthons would surely bring when they realized what she had become. For now, the Vornak was no longer her enemy. It was simply another creature trying to survive, just like her. And in the silence of the cave, as the storm raged outside, Mia knew one thing for sure: she was no longer a helpless little girl. She was something far more dangerous. The galaxy would soon find that out. The storm outside had passed, leaving the air thick with the scent of ozone and damp earth. Mia sat on the cold stone floor of the cave, her breath steady but her mind whirling. The Vornak lay several yards away, its enormous body heaving with each labored breath. It was still alive, its yellow eyes glowing faintly in the dim light, but it no longer posed a threat. The deadly predator that had hunted her was now subdued, its will broken. Mia looked at her hands, now steady after the fierce battle. The faint glow of the nanites beneath her skin had dimmed, but she could still feel their presence like a low hum in the back of her mind. She had become something entirely new, something the Zarthons had not anticipated. Above her, far beyond the darkened sky of Zornak 7, the Zarthon ship hovered in orbit, watching, observing. They had witnessed everything. Inside their sterile control room, their cold, emotionless eyes stared at the monitors, processing the unthinkable. The girl, the insignificant human child they had thrown to the galaxy's deadliest predator, had not only survived, but had defeated it. The Zarthon leader, a tall, silver-skinned figure known as Exarch Kroll, stood before the control screen, his black eyes narrowing in disbelief. His long fingers tapped against his chin as he analyzed the data. "This was not in the calculations," he muttered, his voice a cold, mechanical hiss. The Vornak should have eliminated her within minutes. The other Zarthon scientists around him murmured in agreement. They had anticipated Mia's swift death, another data point in their cruel experiments. But now, the experiment had produced an outcome none of them had foreseen. "She has activated the ancient technology," Kroll said, his voice tinged with something akin to awe. "The relics of Zornak 7 have bonded with her. This was not part of our projections." One of the other Zarthons, a shorter figure with a hunched posture, turned to Kroll. "What do we do now? Retrieve her? Study her further?" Kroll's black eyes glinted. "No. We do not retrieve her yet. We observe. Something ancient has awakened within her, something far older and more powerful than even we understand. If we move too soon, we may destroy the key to a power we've been seeking for millennia." The Zarthon ship hung silently in orbit, cloaked from Mia's sight but ever present. But deep within the ancient technology of Zornak 7, a signal had been sent, a beacon of sorts, activated by the merging of Mia's humanity with the relics of the lost civilization. It was a signal that rippled through the fabric of space, reaching places far beyond the Zarthon's control. Back on the surface, Mia stood up. The low hum of energy beneath her skin made her feel more aware than she ever had before. The fear that had once defined her was gone. In its place was a sense of purpose, though she didn't fully understand it yet. She glanced at the Vornak, its massive form still but watching her cautiously. The tension between them had dissolved, leaving an odd connection in its place. It no longer saw her as prey, and she no longer viewed it as a mindless monster. They were both survivors, bound by the strange turn of fate that had brought them together. Mia stepped toward the cave's entrance, her eyes scanning the horizon. She could feel something beyond the wind and the rocks, something vast, stirring in the distance. The nanites inside her whispered of ancient knowledge, fragments of memories from a civilization long gone. They had lived on this planet once, and their technology had been powerful enough to reshape the galaxy. But they were gone now, wiped out by something or someone. The ground trembled beneath her feet. The Vornak growled softly, its massive head lifting in response to the same disturbance Mia had sensed. Something was coming. Far in the distance, a shape appeared in the sky, growing larger by the second. Mia's eyes narrowed. It wasn't another storm. It was a ship. And not just any ship, a Zarthon vessel, sleek in silver, its dark silhouette cutting through the storm clouds like a blade. They were coming for her. Mia's heart raced. She knew instinctively that she wasn't safe anymore. The Zarthons hadn't expected her to survive, but now that she had, they would try to capture her. The experiments weren't over, not yet. But she wasn't the same helpless girl they had thrown onto this planet. She had changed. She was stronger now. The ship descended rapidly, its engines screaming through the air as it closed in on her position. Mia's mind raced. She couldn't outrun it. She couldn't hide. But she wasn't alone anymore. Without thinking, Mia turned to the Vornak. The creature's eyes met hers, and for a moment, they understood each other. The Vornak rose to its feet, its massive body shaking the ground as it stood tall. It growled low, a deep rumble of readiness. The predator had become her ally. The Zarthon ship hovered just above the ground now, its landing ramp lowering with a soft hiss. The air shimmered as several Zarthon soldiers, clad in dark armor and carrying advanced weapons, stepped onto the surface. Their black eyes locked onto Mia, their movements cold and precise. They advanced slowly, methodically, weapons raised. Mia's fists clenched at her sides, the hum of the nanites intensifying. She could feel the power inside her building, ready to be unleashed, but she didn't know if it would be enough. The Zarthons were far more advanced than she was, their technology designed to subjugate and control. But there was something they hadn't accounted for, something older than their science, older than their cold logic. As the soldiers approached, the ground beneath them began to rumble. The ancient power of Zornak 7, long dormant, was awakening. The relics that had fused with Mia were more than just weapons, they were part of something much larger, something the Zarthons had failed to fully understand. Mia raised her hand, and the ground split open. A surge of energy erupted from the earth, shooting toward the Zarthon soldiers. They barely had time to react before the wave of force slammed into them, sending them sprawling. The ship shuddered as the energy pulse rocked its hull, forcing the remaining soldiers to retreat back toward the ramp. The Vornak roared, a deep, primal sound that echoed through the canyon. It lunged forward, its massive claws tearing into the rocky ground as it charged at the ship. The Zarthons opened fire, their weapons sending bright bursts of energy toward the creature, but the Vornak was too fast, too powerful. It slammed into the side of the ship with a thunderous crash, its claws ripping through the metal as if it were paper. Mia felt the ancient power coursing through her, guiding her actions. She wasn't just using the technology, she was becoming part of it. The relics of the lost civilization had chosen her, bonded with her. She was no longer just a child. She was something more, something the Zarthons could never control. As the last of the Zarthon soldiers retreated, the ship's engines roared to life, and it began to lift off the ground, struggling to escape the chaos. Mia watched as the ship rose higher into the sky, but she knew it wasn't over. The Zarthons would return. They wouldn't stop until they had what they wanted. But she wouldn't stop either. As the ship disappeared into the clouds, Mia turned to the Vornak, who stood beside her, breathing heavily but alive. Together, they had faced the deadliest force in the galaxy and won. But this was just the beginning. Far beyond Zornok 7, the signal that Mia had unknowingly activated continued to pulse through the galaxy, reaching distant stars, ancient worlds, and beings older than the Zarthons could comprehend. The relics had chosen her, but their message had been sent. Something was coming. Something even the Zarthons feared. And Mia, the little girl they had once thought so weak, was at the center of it all.